assisted suicide law after they ran out of time to nullify it. Some have suggested that the council should be working quietly behind the scenes rather than publicly confronting or getting in the face of the House Oversight Committee. What's your feeling?
Why not both?
Right, 2 tracks.
Oh, well, Tom has an even third suggestion in his column this week coming from the editor of the Washingtonian magazine that we should start.
Yes, this is a great idea. Michael Schaefer, who's actually substituted here as a host on the show, on the Kojo show, said, you know what, let's stop complaining to Mr. Chaffetz of Utah and start giving him awards for all the time he's spending on local D.C. regional issues, and then make sure the people in his home district in Utah know that he's spending so much time on us and so little time on them.
There was a couple of weeks ago, there was on the social media a campaign to call your congressman.
Right.
And Congressman Chaffetz, apparently his phones were overwhelmed and had to set up a new phone system. If you live in Utah, hit 1. If you don't live in Utah, hit.
He doesn't apparently have to use transportation because he sleeps in his office, which he has been since 2009, I think, when he got here.
So I think that those who feel like, okay, we'll take them up on their word, we'll call him because the trash man littered when he picked up my trash this morning. I think that's, for some people, that's a quite legitimate way to go.
I want to see a council resolution with all florid writing, whereas, and all that stuff. I'll cover that.
Whereas it's time for us to come to the end of this part of our
broadcast.
We're saying goodbye to Phil Mendelson. He is chair of the D.C. Council. He's a Democrat. Chairman Mendelson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Kojo.
Next up is John Cook. He is a Fairfax County supervisor. You can start calling with questions or comments for him now, 800-433-8850. You can send email to kojo@wamu.org. Tom, have you ever blocked anybody from your Facebook page?
Actually, I have.
Oh, but it's not an
But,
official...
this might surprise people. I blocked them because of the foul language.
It's not an official NBC4 or...
No, I am the sole owner of my social media.
Well,
that's why I don't have my station's name on my Twitter account at Tom Sherwood, because I don't want the station to question what I've said unless it's really horrendous.
Well, Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland and his staff had blocked some people from the governor's official Facebook page.
It's unclear whether they fixed it. They've restored some, but people are still...
after a letter from the ACLU arguing that not all of the people who were blocked were people who were inappropriately offensive, and naming 9, I think, such users, the governor has restored 8 of those 9. He has unblocked 8 of those 9, and they were saying they couldn't find the Facebook details for the 9th person at this point.
Maybe our guest will be able to answer the social media as an elected official, but newspapers and news organizations, some have cut out completely comment sections because the comment sections are a trip to the Wild West of...
They get too rowdy.
Stuff, and so and offensive, racist, whatever. And so it's a problem. So if I'm the governor, if I'm an elected official, if somebody's harassing me, then I would block them if I thought they were being offensive, not because they disagreed with me.
Our guest is John Cook. He's a Fairfax County supervisor. He's a Republican representing the Braddock District. Supervisor Cook, thank you so much for joining us. Do you maintain a Facebook page?
I do.
Do you block people from your Facebook page when they disagree with you?
I don't. In fact, I'd have to figure out how to do that if I was going to do it. That's why I have young staff to do that stuff for me. But look, when you run for office, when you serve in public life, you're going to be criticized, and that's okay. Now, it's not okay, some of the language that you see, but then you try to, how do you draw that line? I don't know. I've been lucky. I have not had postings on anything that I thought were so offensive that I needed to even address that issue.
Well, let's try this. What's your Twitter handle?
John Cook VA.
There we go, at John Cook VA. Well, I'll watch it this afternoon.
How about town halls? What kind of experiences have you been having with town halls? A lot of local representatives are either canceling their town halls or holding their town halls online rather than an in-person town hall, because apparently the town halls themselves are getting either too rowdy for some elected officials or they're getting too difficult for them to handle.
I've seen that around the country in the papers about members of Congress. I'm a big believer in town halls. I do them all the time. I never cancel them. People have the right to ask questions. And what I found is if somebody wants to get rowdy, that's fine, but there's somebody else in the room who's going to say, wait a minute, I've got a serious question to ask, and that person's interrupting me. So I do believe in maintaining control at a meeting. People have a right to say what they want to say, but they don't have a right to dominate the meeting and disrupt it. And there's a difference.
Would you tell Sherwood not to do that here?
Yeah.
You know, as I think a former commentator said around here, democracy is not neat.
It's not. It's not. I have a simple rule in my meetings that everybody gets to ask their first question before anybody gets to ask their second. And so when somebody's had their chance to ask one, then I wait until everyone else has asked their first before I go back to that second person.
Well, let me see if I can get my first in here. Fairfax County Executive Edward Long proposed the 2018 budget last week with a range of cuts that look like they will hurt to schools, services for people with disabilities. Why is Fairfax having issues with revenue?
Well, we need about a 3% revenue increase each year to maintain a level of service, and that's because of population growth and inflation and some other things, cost, health insurance, that kind of thing. So our growth this year is about, I think, 2%, and so that's when you can't maintain the level of service because the growth isn't enough. So that means that some expenditures have to be below what would be needed to maintain level of service. So whether you call that a cut or a reduced increase, the budget's going to go up by about 2% with a level tax rate. And if the economy was growing, we could do more, but the economy's not growing.
You've said Fairfax may need to rethink its priorities. Where do you think the county could cut costs?
Well, I think we should study things. I raised the issue at the budget meeting about a middle school after school program that we have.
And I quote you, so we have millionaires who get free after school care paid for by the taxpayers. We have to look at these things.
Yeah. Well, that was a program that was started when we were having a gang problem. And the idea was give kids a safe place to be after school. Great idea. But it's without cost to everybody. And I've said, well, shouldn't we have people pay the legitimate cost of what's being provided? And certainly those who are unable to pay could have no cost. But,
means tested.
Sure. If you're on free and reduced lunch at school, then there's no cost. That's an easy one to do. We do that in other programs. That's one example. You're not going to balance the budget off of that couple $1 million, but and there's no easy answers here. This budget it's a flat budget. Basically, every program for the most part is continuing as it was. Nobody's getting an increase, and that's hard because when you've got priorities, when you got things you want to do, you want to be able to invest in them, and it's going to mean we're going to have to cut back on some things that we've been doing and stop doing them.
So where's the growth? Is it with the urbanization of the suburbs, there's more policing that needs to be done. There's more trafficking that has to be controlled. Where is the growth in the cost of your government, or is it just a general 3% rise in the cost across the board?
3% is what's needed across the board if you want to maintain the same level of service everywhere.
Is that for raises of employees?
Right. Employee compensation costs 3% a year, that kind of thing. Okay. The things that the priorities that we want to do that we're not able to do in this budget are some of the it's our public safety staffing plan, more police and fire. That gets delayed another year. It's our police reform efforts that need some money. That gets delayed. Some of the diversion first money. This is a real success story, our program of diverting out of incarceration
Julie
into treatment.
Carey at NBC4 wanted specifically asked me to ask you about diversion first. It's the initiative to divert mentally ill offenders into mental health programs,
right. So
which are less expensive,
right.
But that it's on the chopping block.
Well, it's not on the chopping block. It's that's what's needed for the next year. The increase is not all there. We need probably another $2 million. And I'm going to be trying to get that, and by looking at other places in the budget to do reductions. This program, in the past year, 375 people who in the past would have been arrested and put in jail were instead taken to our mental health facility and are getting treatment. Another couple hundred people, our judges are able at the bonding hearing to put into treatment programs with supervision, probation officer supervision, instead of putting them in jail. We're talking about people who are arrested for trespassing, petty theft, minor things like that, who sit in jail for 4 months because they can't pay $500 to bond out. And while they're in jail, the taxpayers are paying $200 a day to take care of them, and their mental state is deteriorating because there's no treatment in jail. There might be medication, there's no mental health treatment. So we get them into treatment. The recidivism rate drops from 80% to 20% based on statistics out of San Antonio. And we can reduce crime, we can save money, and we can save lives.
So there's a fight for this. I have to say this to meet a standard. This is the politics hour. What's happened? When will you vote? When people who want to get involved in Fairfax and make sure their programs are protected or not cut, what is the process? When is the big vote?
Well, the big vote comes at the end of April, but the time to get involved is now, right now. I mean, the timing's perfect because if you wait till the last day, it's too late. We have public hearings the first week in April. That's a good time to come out.
We have a question about that from a caller. So
good. Well,
allow me to go there. David in Fairfax, Virginia. David, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Thanks for taking my call. Good afternoon, Supervisor Cook. It's Dave Edelman with the Invest in Fairfax Coalition. How are you?
Good, David. How are you doing? Good to hear from you.
Good. I was wondering if you would consider an advertised rate of 2 cents for the tax rate this coming Tuesday, February 28th, in order to give citizens, when they come to speak in April, the chance to speak about their priorities, because you're making a very big decision before the voters get to speak out in the April hearings.
Yeah, David,
Can you explain that for the listeners, please?
Sure. By law, we have to what's called advertise a rate. That is, we have to say that when the ultimate budget is passed, the tax rate will be no higher than a certain number. And then we go into the budget process with everyone sort of on notice of what the taxes could be, and then we pass the final budget. So current tax rate's $1.13. That's the rate recommended by the county executive in the coming budget. Some people would like us, as David would like us, to advertise $1.15. We'll see what happens Tuesday. We have to vote on that. It's hard. And David, I know you do great work and you want our teachers to be paid, as do I, and other things. But last year the rate went up by 4 pennies, which was a lot. But then we put a meals tax on the ballot. I voted to put that on the ballot. I took a lot of grief for putting it on the ballot. I thought it was the right thing to do. It didn't pass. And the voters spoke out, and they've told us that they want us to trim spending. And we're going to do that. And it's not easy. We need to find a way to pay our teachers, and the school board needs to find that money in its budget, because teachers are not being paid at the market rate, and that's not a good long-term answer for our county.
And what was that? It was a 4% meals tax, and it would have raised how much? Was it $100 million?
It's about $100 million a year.
Million.
Yeah.
And so if people voted it down, and if they vote that down, then you have to do something else, and you can't.
Or you can't spend the money.
Rates
the property tax is too high, and the property tax lands on seniors and people with fixed incomes who are the least able to pay it. And I thought the four pennies was too high last year, and we need to hold the line on the property tax here. And we had a public dialogue on a different revenue source, and it the people spoke, and we're going to honor that.
Well, let's pile on here, because as we heard earlier in this broadcast, Metro is in trouble, and it's my understanding that Fairfax may have trouble meeting its funding obligations in the future. Is that a possibility?
Well, we're gonna make we meet our funding obligation for Metro this year. Next year is a problem for everybody. Metro is a huge problem. It has to get fixed. Metro is the economic linchpin of the Washington, D.C. area. I'm going to be involved in that discussion. I'm chairing a committee on the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, which is going to be, part of our effort. Virginia General Assembly has asked us to negotiate with our counterparts in Maryland and D.C. about changes to the compact that can then create a better governance system for Metro. It needs a better governance system, and I hope we can get there.
But if the county has rejected other tax hikes,
the state has rejected taxes.
And we heard earlier in this broadcast from Council Chairman Mendelson of the district about a sales tax in all regions. What would be the chances for a sales tax for Metro being approved in the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Well, I think we have to see. You're talking about something a year or two from now, probably before that discussion comes to bear. What people in Virginia want to see, and they're right to want to see this, which is they want to see the governance structure of Metro get fixed. They want to see something happening with labor costs that are going up by 10% or more a year. They want to see the management issues, and Paul Wiedefeld is doing a great job. When people do dumb things that hurt people, they need to be fired. And so those kinds of things have to happen. And when they do, then I think the discussion about how we meet funding is going to be easier to have.
The one concern that Chairman Mendelson mentioned is that in Richmond, there is a completely different view of what Metro does than there is in Northern Virginia, where it actually serves. And I suggested somewhat facetious, whatever, I can't say that word, that you just don't send the trains out to Dulles and get the, I know you don't like that, but why not just cut back the service in Virginia? If you don't want to pay for it, we won't give it to you.
You're going to do the same thing in Maryland? Look, the system is a system. It's the people from Virginia coming into the district that help the government function and everything else. The system.
We don't get to tax them.
Yeah, well, the system needs to get fixed, and It's hard. The hard thing in Richmond, one of my delegate friends explained this to me. He said, John, when I talk to people representing Pulaski County, where there's a $22,000 a year average household income, and they say to me, why should I put money into the Washington D.C. metro system? It's a hard discussion. So we have to understand that Virginia is a big state, and there's a lot of problems in poorer parts of the state, and they look at Northern Virginia and they say, you guys take care of yourselves. So that's the battle.
But the region sends more money to Richmond than it gets back.
Oh, more than that. We build every school. Fairfax County builds most of the schools in the Commonwealth of Virginia through our money. So it is, it's a team effort, and you just have to make that case that we're all in this together. Fairfax taxpayers send money to Richmond. It's spent around the state, and sometimes we need some of that money to come back because we're the engine. We're driving the state.
Immigration? Can we?
Do you want to go there?
Moment
Sure.
for immigration?
Sure.
There's been some immigration activity in your county.
Demonstrators have been protesting.
Right, and some people are saying that the county acts as a sanctuary county. The Trump administration is threatening to crack down, or whatever that would mean, on sanctuary. Where do you stand on what sanctuary county means?
We are not a sanctuary county. We've asked our county staff that question on the record at board meetings to make sure we're not. We comply with every federal law that there is. We do what we're required to do. We have for years in the jail, when people come into the jail, our sheriff, who is independently elected, when people are fingerprinted, that data is sent to ICE as well as FBI. And if a detainer order is issued, people are detained. And
anyone who's arrested?
If you're arrested, you're fingerprinted.
Fairfax County cooperates with the federal government when it comes to identifying individuals with serious records. But
so if I got arrested, my fingerprints would be sent to the FBI, and
it always is that way.
Everybody.
It's always been that way. If you get arrested anywhere, your fingerprints are taken and
not
sent
that that's
in.
going to happen. But
find out that bad stuff you may have done.
What the demonstrators were protesting against were the fact that it seemed like ICE agents parked themselves across the street from a shelter and simply stopped people who were walking out of there. President Trump has stepped up enforcement, but a lot of people take issue with the idea of violating spaces like churches and schools. Where do you stand, and what is Fairfax's position on that?
I am concerned about that as well. That Rising Hope Mission Church, not only is a church, but it's one of our hypothermia shelters. And, we have a program in the county with our churches that people can come in out of the cold in the winter so they don't get hypothermia. And we don't want people chased out of our churches out of fear. So there should be some balance. We don't really know. We don't have any official information on what exactly was happening. If somebody's a criminal and authorities are arresting them, that's what ought to happen. If somebody's caught up in what's being called collateral deportation, I don't really know what that means. I saw that term in some news reports, but somebody's standing outside of a shelter and you're supposed to have reasonable suspicion under the law to make a legal stop. And
So maybe I think it partially means that if you go after, say, you as if you've committed a crime as an undocumented worker, and they come for you, but you happen to be standing next to someone who is an undocumented worker, also collateral damage. He or she happens to be standing there. She gets swept up also.
Yeah, and I think the courts are probably going to have something to say about that eventually, because the law, as I understand it, is you have to have reasonable suspicion to stop somebody and ask them for papers, and maybe there is reason. If there's something happening, you have to judge that on the scene.
If I remember correctly, you didn't go to the Republican convention in Cleveland.
Yeah, I think I was busy that
I think
week.
you were in Florida fishing or something. I remember you said,
He
or
was
something
really
like
busy.
that. How do you think President Trump is doing?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what is said next week. We need an economic growth plan in this country.
State of the Union address.
Right, and I'm hoping that he is going to propose a plan that can pass and can get the economy moving. It's certainly been a rough few weeks. I'm not a big fan of things that look kind of messy. I would like to see some sort of order come, and I'm hoping that it's just a new team getting their feet wet.
Are we the enemy, the media?
Tom, you're not my enemy. You're my friend. The media, look, everyone has a job to do. Reporters have rules. Just like I'm a lawyer, I have rules through the bar. I expect the media to follow its canons of aggressively reporting the news and reporting it accurately with factual support. And I don't think it helps anyone to have endless fighting. I've always tried to get along with the media. I love coming on the show and talking to people, and it's part of my job to talk to the citizens.
Don't have a lot of time left, but as part of its first civilian review panel for the police department, Fairfax recently named its first ever independent police auditor, Richard Schott, a veteran FBI agent. He will be reporting to the board, but there was a recent case of an officer-involved shooting in which the officer's name was not released. Some were angered by what they saw as a continuing lack of transparency by the department, despite working to create a culture of transparency. Will having Richard Schott help the department to navigate these issues?
It will a lot. It will also give people the confidence that there is an independent, qualified person reviewing every use of force case in the county. The case that, Kojo, you made reference to, the chief of police did come in and brief us on what's going on, and he is in the midst of a very detailed risk assessment in that matter to make sure that if he is going to release the name of an officer, that it's not going to cause harm to the officer, and that's what he's required to do. And I think he justified the need for more time. And we have a meeting next week, and we're going to ask him again, what's up? Where are you on your assessment? And expect him to justify where he is.
That's all the time we have. John Cook is a Fairfax County supervisor. He's a Republican representing the Braddock District. Always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Kojo.
Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter with NBC4 and a columnist with the current newspapers. That's it for the show today, but there's always more going on for you at our website, where you can catch up on any shows you've missed this week through our archive, like a conversation we did yesterday about why the ACLU is threatening to sue Maryland Governor Larry Hogan because some people were blocked from the governor's Facebook page. But that's, as I said, is about all the time we have. Oh, on Monday, we'll be talking with D.C. Schools Chancellor Antoine Wilson, and we'll hold a special edition of Your Turn to get your perspectives on how the new administration is and is not affecting communities in our region. That's Monday. Until then, thank you all for listening. I'm Kojo Nnamdi.
The Kojo Nnamdi Show is produced by Michael